So I'd like to introduce Adam Fer, who is a product manager for Google, and then also Tyler Blatt, who is our lead analytics engineer at InfoTrust, to talk a little bit more about these concepts.
Here we go.
Hello, everybody.
Hi. We're going to stand because we're that excited about tag management. And I'm not kidding. Okay.
Hold on a second. I gotta.
Oh, yeah.
Can we go back one? Awesome. You want to go over there?
Yeah. So for today, server-side GTM and server-side tag management is kind of a heady and complex topic, but we're gonna break it down. And to what Lucas was saying, Tyler will really walk through how it empowers first-party data ownership, which is one of the most exciting aspects of what server-side GTM can unlock. So first, we'll start with a very quick refresher on tag management systems, just so everyone's on the same page. We'll talk about some of the pain points with client-side tagging and why it's so difficult, especially in this new regulatory context. From there, we'll go into server-side GTM, some of the basics of how it works, and then Tyler will really spend a lot of time about focusing on how server-side GTM solves these client-side tagging pain points. And we'll talk about how to get started because you'll all be excited, like we are, to work on server-side tagging.
Awesome. Perfect.
Okay, so a very quick refresher on tag management systems. These have been around for over a decade, so all of you likely use one of these, if not Google Tag Manager, one of the others. But just very quickly, how they work. This super simple diagram. You have a website, user comes to that website, and in the old world, you would have to deploy individual tags, little bits of code for each partner that you're working with, and they would collect the data for whatever conversion or audience that you wanted. Tag management systems simplify this. You deploy one tag on your website, in this case, a Google Tag Manager tag. And when that user comes, Google Tag Manager loads and says, well, for this particular page, which tags are supposed to load? And I'll bring those along. So maybe it's Google Analytics and Google Ads and Facebook tags I'll need to load for a particular time. And they'll facilitate bringing those back to the browser and letting those things run and collect the data. Fairly straightforward. It's been around for a while, but it helps simplify tag management relative to where we were in the 2000s.
The one thing I'd like to add here is a perfect example, an explanation. But one thing that's important to note here is you don't get to pick where that code is running. That code is running on your customers' computers and their environments, on their machines, their browsers, their phones. Everywhere this is running, you do not control how JavaScript runs on their machine or what ad blockers they have on. Anything that happens in their environment, there's absolutely no control what's happening on those computers. So one of the big things, and we'll talk about this when we go through all the pain points of client side, is a lack of control in this area. That's when you think about this, that just by nature, you do not control where this is happening. It's happening somewhere else.
Yeah, that's a great point. And just to clarify, when we say client side, it's really code that's running on the user's computer.
Exactly.
So we'll use that a lot moving forward.
I was just saying, I'm sorry, I was just thinking about how it started.
No, you're
No,
fine.
no,
Go ahead.
please.
Thinking out loud, it's basically stored on Google servers. That's why if you work with developers, it can be really hard because they're like, how are you controlling things on the site or in this environment?
Yeah.
And they're like, did you host the server? You have some control if the code is on your site, but exactly what you're saying, it doesn't tell your user, browser, everything to do.
Yes.
There's stuff that you have to do.
Yeah, we'll actually talk about that in the pain points a little bit.
Absolutely. Okay. So simplified tagging, but there are a lot of problems that come with it, especially these days. As Tyler mentioned, control and data governance is really difficult with client-side tagging. We'll talk about that in more detail. It also makes it more difficult to own your first-party data in the same way. We'll go into more detail. And then finally, with the upcoming deprecation of third-party cookies, client-side tagging and kind of the way that these things used to work is under a lot of pressure and needs to change. And we think server side is like, what are the best ways to navigate that change?
On that future point as well, I mean, it's stale technology. These are things we've been doing for 25 years as far as collecting tags from in this client side perspective. So not just third-party cookie deprecation, but lots of other technological advancements allow us to enhance how we've been collecting data. There's quite a lot cooler use cases, and we'll get to the art of the possible a little bit later on what that ideal future case might look like.
Perfect. All right, so I gave the basic example of one website, one container, a couple of tags, but the reality is most advertisers have a lot of websites. For a number of reasons, they have a lot of GTM containers. And so managing this at scale is really difficult. You want to have consistent implementations. You want to have a consistency in your data layer so that you're collecting a clean set of data on each website. All these tags behave in different ways. And so when a developer asks what the Facebook tag versus the TikTok tag versus the Google tag is doing, it was really difficult to manage that conversation. And then now with this very complex regulatory environment, ensuring that each of your implementations are compliant in their respective markets is extremely challenging.
Yep. Yeah, I can attest to this. I've worked with, I see a number of customers that have in the thousands of websites that I've worked with managing how they keep standardization across all of their brands and keeping that under control while maintaining, like regulations for privacy and even really just documentation and standardization on how they'll report across all of their brands is a problem in itself, not thinking about privacy. And the client side, it doesn't really lend itself to solving this problem. It's sort of a mess. There's lots of things going. You have piggybacking and some other things we'll talk about in further slides. So governing can just be very, very difficult. And there are entire teams and industries surrounding tackling just this problem with client side.
Yeah, so taking one of those specific examples, tag piggybacking, which you might have heard of. So Google Tag Manager is loading tags. You've gone into the UI, you define that, okay, I want this floodlight tag to load on this particular page. Fine, there's clarity, you understand what's happening. But floodlight tags can carry other tags with them. And so maybe that floodlight tag is loading a bunch of other tags from other measurement providers. And so when data governance constraints were fairly low, that was okay. But now the bar is really high, as Cassie just walked us through. And so having a situation like that is kind of untenable because now you have to explain, okay, a floodlight tag is loading. You also have to understand that the floodlight tag is loading a bunch of other stuff. And that just becomes really difficult, especially in scale of thousands of websites, and it's impossible.
Couldn't agree more. I have a little bit more on that, but we'll touch on it in a later slide.
Cool. All right, and on the concept of ownership, so with client-side GTM, it's loading and essentially bringing on the tags for each of these respective platforms and letting them collect data and send them to their platforms. In my case, it's usually a Google tag. So whether it's analytics or Floodlight or Google Ads, that data is taken from that user's browser and sent directly to Google. Same with Facebook, same with TikTok, name your measurement provider. They're collecting the data. You're just facilitating the transaction.
Yeah, I see this a lot. So we wanted to build this report, but Facebook changed the API. We don't have the measurement. We collected the data. It all ran through our pipes. We're at their will. It was all of your data is being distributed. All your audiences are being built somewhere that you don't own. You want to switch from Newstar to LiveRamp. You want to switch your DMPs. Do you own your audiences in a first-party context? Probably not. Most audience definitions, analysis, everything's happening in platform. So everybody, I hear this from marketers all the time. Oh, I have to go here for this and here for this. What if I could just see it all in one place? That's constantly. It's a huge pain in the industry. Some people have this solved with data warehouses, but it's not exactly easy. This is something that takes a lot of effort to send it all out and then wrangle it all back in together.
So on top of all of that, it really slows down your website, which is a problem. I mean, we've all used the internet, and when you go to a website that has a lot of tags, you know it, and you're like trying to. My mom complained, and she's like, "Where's the complaint department at Google?" Like, unfortunately, it's me, but and so loading all these tags, it's causing a huge performance hit. Bad user experience, and when we talk about building these relationships, it's not great.
One of the things I'll add on to that too is, like the tags share the same resources that all the other HTML shares. So it's literally stopping them from seeing the content of your website when fired too early. When fired too late, there's your discrepancy. There's your 5% you're missing because people left. So it's inherently flawed in that it has to be heavy for accuracy and ahead when all the important stuff's loading if you want it to be accurate. But if you wait till later, you might not get it. That data, that's where all your discrepancies are coming from. So it's also just an inherently flawed system when you think about client side and how it is its relationship to site speed. Oops. So this is, I love how beautifully ugly this is. This is from our product tag inspector. This is a live customer scan. And this is a fourth of the image. So I don't have the customer on here, but this is a fourth of what's happening on their page. So I'll show, you probably can't read completely, but over here we have Amazon product ads. They know they're firing that pixel, but do they know they're firing 20 other pixels that fire off of that? What happens when the CCPA request comes in? You got to delete that person's data. Do you know where you sent everything? What's going on? And this is the point of, what about site speed? All of those tags loaded. They thought Amazon might be affecting with their 1 pixel. They fired 21 pixels. And all of those were affecting their site speed. So this is just an example of how complicated and big governance can get. That we have some nice, simple slides here to show you the concepts, but in reality, this gets messy, and it gets messy fast.
And as we mentioned earlier, third-party cookies are going away, you might have heard. And so
What?
as Tyler was saying, this is relying on stale technology. And so there are some client-side tags like the Google tag that can interact in a first-party context, but it's limited relative to what we can do in server-side. And we'll go into more detail. But navigating that change, which is one of the big challenges of the next couple of years, you want to make sure that your technology infrastructure is set up to do it.
I don't know if I have much more to add on that. I think at the Durability Summit, we all know third-party cookies are going away. So that's, yeah, I think it's safe.
Yeah. Okay. So hopefully we helped illustrate the problem. And now let's get into what server-side does, how it works, and how it can help solve this. So at its core, server-side GTM is Google Tag Manager, but built for the cloud. And so it allows you to route your data from your website to your own server first before forwarding it on to any third party, whether it's Google, Facebook, et cetera. And so in this simplified diagram, you're collecting data from a single pipeline. So if you think of that previous slide where data was shooting out to all the different partners, that's not happening. It's going from one tag to one place, and that place is your own server. And that can be in Google Cloud, it can be in other clouds. And so it's on your infrastructure, you get to see it and decide what happens next. You can delete it, you can send it off to other places and talk about what you can do there. And then you can decide, okay, Google Analytics deserves to see this data. Google Ads deserves to see this data. And so you, from a compliance perspective, all these things, you have a much higher transparency and control over what's happening with data collected on your website.
Yep, and I'll say it again just to really talk about the difference of ownership and control. On client side was happening on other computers where we do not control. But finally, we have our little black box in the cloud that we control what goes in and comes out. And that's the big thing. So when we talk about how are we going to govern this? How do we talk about privacy around this? How do we talk about future use cases where we do custom things around it? The big important thing to remember is this is our cloud, this is our environment, and we control what comes in and what comes out, rather than that being relegated to our customers' computers.
And just to reiterate that this is really Google Tag Manager. I mean, Google Tag Manager is meant to stand for simplicity. It's free to use. And once you're set up with server side, it's really the same experience. You can go into a UI, you can pick a new tag, you can deploy it based on some rules. It's very straightforward. And so we have integrations with, all the main Google products, of course, and also this community gallery where it's constantly growing, people submitting new tag templates that allow you to do a lot of different things, all very easy to use.
Yeah, I would say just as a power user and a longtime user of GTM, it looks and operates almost exactly the same. If you want to visualize it, if you are a GTM user, just picture picking up your data layer and throwing it to the cloud. That's really what's happening. Is it's just an event stream now that's going, and it will operate the same once it's thrown up into the cloud. So it's the long-term getting set up on this takes a little bit of engineering, a little bit of a computer science, somebody going in, but operating day to day, it's not that technical. We can go back to having it is somewhat technical, like tagging always is, but you don't need an engineer to operate this day to day, which is one of the beauties, I think.
I just wanted to touch on a few things that we've launched recently, just to show that this is a product that we're investing in and we think has a bright future. So the first is enhanced conversion support. So enhanced conversions in Google Ads and soon SA360 allows you to collect user-provided data like emails and help inform conversion modeling. It's part of the way of building a durable conversion measurement foundation. We'll have support with that. So really the thing to take away there is that we want to have parity with client side in terms of all the features and functionality that someone would expect. Where it gets exciting is this cloud Firestore integration. So Firestore is a database essentially, and you can look up data in your server before sending it on to Google Analytics, Google Ads, et cetera. And so this is really showcasing how server side goes beyond what client side could ever do. And Tyler will talk through this in more detail, but we're really hoping to expand upon what client side was built for and not just try to replace features with better data governance.
100%. The art of the possible gets crazy. We have a slide specifically on Firestore in the next section, and I'll wax poetic on it.
Finally, if you are operating in a market with consent mode and consent banners, we have full modeling for that. So if you need more details, happy to talk afterwards.
Beautiful. All right, so now we're going to step into, sounds great, server-side solves all the problems. We see the problems client-side has. How does server-side solve these problems? Why does it make sense? So we want to get in the nitty-gritty. How does this work operationally? A lot of these use cases should mirror the problems that we saw in that first section, or what are the problems with client-side? I want to show you how server-side GTM can address this. And this slide is meant to show the simplicity. Just with the GA4 tag, the event stream set up from it, you can then start streaming to your server-side container, and that is going to be a central event stream. Everything is going to read from there. So when we saw that distributed data of we're sending to Facebook, we're sending to Google Analytics, we're sending to ads, and really the best of you are probably sending more than 20. We're just keeping this simple. It becomes a mess. This is a way to consolidate that, put it all into a black box and say, this is where I'm sending data. I know exactly that these 9 tags. Think about the piggybacking example. And when I sent data to Amazon, what did they do? They sent it to 21 more people. And server side, when I go to look at that same thing, I just sent it to Amazon. This wasn't on my client's computer where all this piggybacking happened, but I just brokered with one person. And so when I think of my responsibility in this and what I am executing on, it makes it much simpler and easier to govern. I know exactly what's coming out of this container because I don't have to wonder and scrape JavaScript. I can just look at my container and it's static. I don't have to ask what happened, but also I know exactly what data was flowing through because it was a single pipeline. And I will get to another point later on how we can look at, there's another big feature that lets us look at, okay, what does that data stream look like? Awesome. So this is my other point. And I think one of the biggest ones, and I'm actually going to throw a couple different concepts. We talked about this a little bit at dinner last night. The biggest thing to me is being able to own your data stream. Because right now you're sending out to everywhere but yourself. There is no real ownership to what's happening. It's just everybody else have our data, but we don't really have a model for it. One of the things I like to think about is how you would model your own data in this coming future. So the ability to stream data directly into BigQuery and in real time, that's really powerful. But what does that mean? How do I come up with my own data model? And one of the philosophies that I find important, just because so many people are fighting this new future, is to design a data model that splits anonymous and targeted data. So we can have this holistic anonymous set that exists in streams in real time and we can operate with, and we can run models against, and we can understand. And we also have this targeted set. And there's a line between those in which they could be bridged, but it is severed whenever a user wants to. That way that anonymous set stays pure, and this targeted set can be used for hyper-targeting models. But then when we think the CLVs and the propensity, sure, they belong over here with that targeted set. But how do we start to develop, now that we've separated these concepts, how do we start to think in the future against this anonymous set? We've separated it. What does the pipeline look after that? These are our MMMs. These are finding out our customer profiling from an anonymous perspective. What are the anonymous signals that we can use to figure out what our customers are doing and what is the best pathing analysis? Things like this, so we can start to flex how that evolves the use case. And another thing that I said I would touch on from the last slide is you can pour your event stream straight into BigQuery. You need to figure out governance, it goes straight into BigQuery. I know every single unique event that I've collected, every user attribute that I'm collected. If you want to analyze your event stream and hold it against a governance standard, it's just that easy. You can own everything that you've collected in a first-party context.
No notes, no notes.
So another thing that I hear all the time is like waiting on dashboards, waiting on insights. You look at, I love Universal Analytics. It's got a 4-hour SLA until you can see the results in there. So it's a great product, but it's got to run through processing. Well, in the real world, for a transaction, we don't really need to process it. We know that happened and we can start reporting on it and visualizing it and getting it in front of ourselves immediately. So one of the things that I find incredibly powerful about this server-side GTM to BigQuery connection is just the time to insights. Anything we can flow on our own flat KPI tables and see them instantly when we can watch them populate in real time. There's a customer that we built a real-time prediction dashboard. So we'll look at the next 24 hours of their transactions and tell them within a 5% error, how much money they'll make hour over the next 24-hour period. And they use that to manipulate marketing and understand what's happening, talk to distribution. Well, I had to hack GA quite a bit in order to get a real-time stream that was 100% accurate. No longer is that difficult. We can put that transaction data straight into BigQuery and run the models against it in real time and start putting out those results, get those visuals in front of people and let them start looking at this. So time to insights, it just lowers the bar completely. So this is probably the coolest one. This is what I said I would get to later, and when we were talking about Firestore and art of the possible, we were talking about how cool A/B testing can be against some of these new environments, and with this Firestore connection, it becomes even more crazy. So the way to think about Firestore is it's essentially a lookup that can happen in real time. It's a database where when we're passing through, we can look up some data and send it back about what's happening right now. So a good example they use in the documentation around server-side GTM is product margins. So if you had your product list of the price of all the products, but what your actual profit margins are, you could send that back in the response in a lookup and drive users to products that have a higher profit margins. Or you can also send that response back to pass into your analytics so that you can, have better profitability measurement. But one things that I think are interesting is customer scoring, like looking up any type of customer scoring, looking up propensity models on the fly and sending those back in custom responses. I mean, you want to talk about the people you want to A/B test against. If you can find out in real time that this customer just got put into a model and we had that response come back, what a great time to start your testing. And it's all about lowering that time of analysis to data science, like we talked with real time, and then also with Firestore, getting that information right back to the customer while they're still on the page. So everything with server side, we talked about futuristic art of the possible. Yes, it's solving these third-party cookie problems, but it's also solving these problems of re-engaging with the customer, getting in front of them, and lowering the time to insights.
Yeah, and I think the important thing to add there is that because this is happening in server-side GTM, I mean, we have it on the slide here, but just to reemphasize, you get to do this and then apply it not just to Google, not just, oh, we're going to import this to GA4 or we're going to import this to Floodlight. You can do it across everything. Any tag that can accept this kind of data, you can just route it through. So you're only doing it once. You're doing this lookup once, and then all of your marketing partners get to benefit from it. So it really simplifies the sort of first-party data activation that is going to be so prevalent moving forward.
Yep, 100%. This one's pretty obvious and self-explanatory, but it's one of the things everybody's looking at is because your server-side GTM container can really be deployed anywhere a Docker container can be deployed, you can put a custom URL against it. So in the example here where we as www.infotrust.com can stand up datacollection.infotrust.com and start collecting all of our data in a first-party context. Our cookies are in a first-party context. So no longer is everything running from a third party, but we're completely interpreted in a first-party context, which means we can do a lot of cool things that with third-party cookies going away.
It's more durable.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Durable ownership compliance.
Yeah.
So this is the last of like the benefits of server-side slides, but it's another big one that it's driving a lot of people. So when I say, you know, third-party cookies going away, first-party ownership drove this catalyst to investing in this technology. This is something that's been true for forever and is just a reality of us just now getting to this type of technology. Is it speeds up the page quite a bit. So when I talked about we got to fire, these 30 tags need to fire because they're essential and we don't want them to drop off, and they all have to fire before a window loads. Well, that's going to cause quite of an impact. Well, if all of those tags are instead just one event stream to the cloud, we've essentially had a huge net performance gain, but we're actually more accurate than we were before on the client side. So not only do you gain accuracy, but you gain speed. So it's about the best of the both worlds and just solves a big problem. One caveat that I will say, though, there are a number of tags that do need to fire on page once. There's still plenty of tags that the client-side tag manager still is necessary, just not as necessary. So the goal of this hybrid environment is fire only what you need one time and then move the rest into the event stream so we can stop that firing. Beautiful.
Cool. So hopefully that got you excited about server-side. I know it was a lot of information. So to get started, let's say you're like, Adam, this sounds great. Tyler really convinced me on the future of first-party data ownership. What do I actually do? So you need a cloud project. This can be Google Cloud, and sGTM works well in Google Cloud. You can use AWS, you can use Azure, anything that supports a Docker image, which you can go. Yeah. And it does require some technical resources to stand up. So you need some buy-in from IT, someone who understands cloud, and ideally someone who also understands tagging to help you set up the initial infrastructure. Because you're essentially setting up your own computers to run the server container. And so that involves some infrastructure work. And that infrastructure also does cost some money. So server-side GTM itself is free. Google Tag Manager has always been free. But because you're running these servers, you're going to have to pay either GCP or some other cloud provider for it. The cost can be highly variable depending on how much traffic and how much data you're collecting on your website. So it's hard to give a sort of blanket answer. It can be anywhere from $500 a month to, you know, a really large, highly visited website could be $10K a month.
Yeah, we have, I won't say who, but a very large CPG company runs one GTM container. And it is very cost efficient for running at that scale. And it also enforces a standardization across the whole company. So since they're all reading from the same one container, that means they're all getting the same standard event stream. They're all sending data to the brands the same way. So when we talk about that governance at scale, that's beautiful. And for them, feedback has been, for the cost, it is absolutely worth the investment. It's a pretty low cost for as far as cloud goes.
I have a quick question. But within TQL, we have several different user groups as we consider them. Obviously, our employees, our carriers being the truck drivers, the customers being Walmart, whoever.
Yep.
In that scenario, we also have many different sets of requirements as to what pieces we gather on each user group. So in that case, would we do something like 3 separate containers, one for each user group, and then standardize what those points are across each?
The key word there is standardized. For everybody that didn't hear the question, essentially they have 3 different work streams that would happen within the company, and they think about, from a data collection perspective, do we split those into 3 separate containers or do we treat them as one? And the real answer to that is standardization, and it's up to you. So if you want to handle that kind of switching and that different logic in one container, you feel it's easier from an IT overhead, however you guys feel, to manage it that way, totally fine. You're taking on one burden in one place and one burden in the other. If you'd like to manage 3 different containers and have very specific tailored event streams, that's also completely valid. That's where it comes down to strategy, and it's just a tailor fit kind of implementation. All right.
Okay. We have 1 minute.
Lucas is trying to get us off. He's like, I'm going to shut these guys up.
We'll be at a happy hour afterwards, so we can chat more. But
we have another question.
So there are other server-side data collection solutions. Some run on the client's infrastructure and some run on the vendor's infrastructure. We're a huge fan of server-side data collection. Does any of your talking points, do they apply equally to all server-side data collection, or would you say that GTM container, because it has some benefits, but it also doesn't have all the features of some of the other. But do you want to make any comments about options for server-side data collection?
Yeah, GTM is the best. You don't really have to. No, you
What
should
I'll-
answer
What
this.
I'll tell you
unbiased.
for sure. I mean, like, because the reality is we evaluate the market all the time. And I would say most of them do the game generally the same. And the huge benefit to GTM is customability. They all come off the shelf. So like if you think of the ETL, reverse ETL flavor ones, the privacy flavor one, they're all coming in their own flavor. They're doing the same thing with some flavor. They still have the limitation of the flavor they chose. So whatever you're picking with, they're going to have that flavor where it's significantly easier and you can do a lot more to do any type of custom work inside server-side GTM. So where it has the edge, yeah, a lot of them are similar, like site speed. If you're picking tags up and putting them somewhere else, that's going to be universal. But when you think about how you handle governance or what your abilities are, or even our tailor fit 3 work streams question, the ability to do custom things is a lot easier in server-side GTM.
So just touch on things since you're so well informed. Meta router, Telium, versus this, right? Those are fairly interesting.
Yep, I'll take this one. Don't worry. Telium's new to the game, so I don't want to comment too much on them. Like that, they've evolved from their client side, but I don't know from the server side. They've started like CDP stuff. They've started all these extra features. So again, like I said, flavors, right? Judging them as purely a server side platform, I'm more interested in their flavors than server side. I haven't seen anything where I'm like, okay, they've really changed the game. What I will say about MetaRouter is they have the strongest flavor from the concept of site speed. So MetaRouter is completely committed to getting everything off the page, which nobody else is that crazy to take that kind of challenge on. So I will say that's where they stand out. But like I said about server-side GTM, what you get with MetaRouter is exactly what you get. You're not getting anything custom. They're going to focus on site speed. All this other stuff about governance, they'll be like, go find a partner. That's going to be the response for this. So it's again, from server-side GTM, it's a lot better from the custom perspective. And all these other platforms, you'll find they just focused on something. And Telium is focusing on that advertising side. They're heavily going to first-party identity graph, CDP, all that stuff. That's where they're leaning. We can take the last. Why don't you, if you want to meet with us at the happy hour afterwards, I'm happy to answer any questions. And as you can see, I'm like, once you wind me up, I won't stop. So
you got to get them
form a
off.
line.
All right, thanks everyone.